Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Abrams. I'm here with Kevin Pierce, the voice of the apocalypse. And we're talking about our newest series together, The Crusader. Book 1 is already out. Book 2 is available on Tuesday, I think the 14th. And Book 3 then is out in January on the 11th. We're putting these out as fast as we can do it. Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me be a part of it.
So tell me, you and I have worked together on some probably 25 books. What struck you about The Crusader? You wrote me some notes saying that, this was a little different than some of the other world-ending stuff we worked on together.
Well, I sure enjoyed John Beck. I mean, that was my instant love. It struck me, Tom, as the kind of book that before I started doing this for a living, I was an avid reader. And one of the sort of curses of being an audiobook narrator is you don't get to read for purely pleasure anymore. You can find pleasure in the books that you read, but you can't do it purely for pleasure. And so there just isn't a lot of pleasure reading. This was the kind of book I would have read for pleasure back before I started doing this for a living.
Well, that I think is probably the highest compliment. What about it struck you in particular?
Definitely strong character. I mean, first of all, great name. Kudos to the author for the great name. John Beck is a fabulous name, and he's a strong guy, a little bit broken, but certainly heading in the right direction in a lot of places. And he's on a crusade. He's on a mission, and that just falls right into my bailiwick of things that I like to read about. So it fits that perfectly.
So when I wrote John Beck, and I'll admit that when I was looking for the name of a character, obviously the one that everybody knows us for is Marcus Battle, and it's such a unique name.
Right.
Some critics have called it a ridiculous name, but that's fine. They remember it. When I was thinking of a name for this character, I wanted it to be short and punchy. And actually, I kind of thought about John Wick and how that name is just easy to remember. Everybody loves those movies. And so obviously I wasn't going to name the character John Wick. That would confuse people and probably get me in legal trouble. But I liked John Beck. And I also wanted a character who people could refer to only by his last name. And it makes sense. And you're right. He's very, very broken. But I think in a lot of ways redeemable.
Oh, definitely. And I'm curious, a question I wanted to ask you that I didn't. When I assume you've got notebooks or computer files just full of little snippets of ideas here and there. When you first had your idea for this series of stories, what did it look like? What was that first little just seed, rice kernel of an idea?
So with this one, I wanted to do an EMP book. I'd not really done one. Spaceman, which we did together, was it took place after a coronal mass ejection, so power went out. So I wanted to do an EMP book, and so I thought, okay, well, I'm thinking about energy going out. I live in Houston, we're the energy capital of the world. I'll put a guy in an oil rig. I mean, he's not on the International Space Station trying to get home. He's on an offshore platform. And I know there's a difference between a rig and a platform, but he's offshore and he needs to get home. And I wanted there to be this connection to his family. And that's where the genesis for the relationship with his daughter was that's how he finds out that they've lost power. Is by being on the phone with it or on a video call with his daughter when the power goes out. So that was sort of the germination of it. And then I just naturally kind of gravitated toward that sort of neo-Western deal that I like to write about so much.
It shows.
Oh, well, thanks. And one thing when we first started working together, and I wanted to ask you about this, one of the things, you sent me a sample of you reading the beginning of Home, and that just thoroughly convinced me. You voiced so many of these books. You seem to have a voice perfect for the sort of Western theme that, there's a I hate the word, but there's both the gravitas, but there's also this grit to your voice. Do you feel like that lends itself to that sort of story?
Definitely, and it's probably why I also do, in addition to the post-apocalyptic work, true crime stories, because they kind of fit into that same tone space. They're serious, even when you're talking about things that don't seem serious. The stories are serious, and I think those two share that in common, and it's why I get called back to do more of each.
What is your process when you get a book? When I send you a manuscript, what's the process between the time that I email you that manuscript and you are finished with the work? What does that look like for you?
So first question, and it's a great one. The first question I always get when I meet somebody who is curious about what I do for a living, after they get over the fact that this is an actual job and somebody's doing this, first question is always, do you have to read the book before you perform the book? Do you read the book before you go into the studio? And most definitely is the answer to that question. So there's always the first read through to get an idea what the book's about, who the characters are, how they interplay with one another, how they and their needs move the story along. And it may not be the most thorough read, but it's enough to get familiar with it. And then during the performance, when it's actually being recorded, it's reading every single. I'm probably the first person and maybe the last person in the world to actually read every word of the story. There's no skipping. There's no passing through a section. It's reading every word of the story, and so it's probably a couple weeks all told from the time that I see the manuscript to the time that it turns into a performed work. And then, as you know, there's somebody that follows along behind me to listen to what I've recorded, to make sure that I've held straight to the words that were in the manuscript.
And so in this instance, we did something a little different too. And I think with the beginning of the Unprepared series, I took snippets of the files you sent me and had a book trailer created for that series. And in this instance, there were specific things I wanted. So I sent you some sound ahead of time, which you graciously tracked for me. And I want to share that trailer for the few people who haven't seen it. So here's the trailer featuring Kevin Pierce.
A surprise attack, a grid down, a fight for survival. John Beck is the hero we don't deserve, but he's exactly who we need when the world falls apart. It's his mission to help the weak against the strong in a new, lawless wilderness, a no man's land that used to be the United States of America. He fights the demons of his past as he searches for the only family he has left. From Tom Abrams comes The Crusader, Book 1, Best Laid Plans, an EMP post-apocalyptic survival story. Available now in ebook, print, and audio.
And one thing I think that is absolutely true, which I know you found, is that some people read my books because they like me. A lot of them listen to the books because they like you. And so you become, I think, these characters, and oftentimes when I'm writing, I'll hear your voice in my head. Do you get that a lot from people that it doesn't matter to them what the book, who the author is, but that you're the narrator? You froze up a little bit there, so I'm going to answer for you and say yes. People often
I like to think that's always the case.
Sure, that they pick a book because it's you. Right.
Yeah, it definitely happens, and I definitely think it's the two together is a good thing. So.
Yeah, I had, it's funny. I had a friend of mine who's a very successful author, and he said, it seems. You're a little frozen at the moment, though. I heard you, but I'll keep talking while I wait for you to unfreeze. I think you're beginning to unfreeze there. So I had another series that you didn't narrate, and it didn't do nearly as well. And that author commented and said people like the team together of the two of you, your words and his voice. And I noticed there are some authors, I know Franklin Horton in particular, who it's a Franklin Horton and Kevin Pierce book, and it immediately just skyrockets and people love it. I imagine that's gratifying for you to have partnerships with authors who write such good stories. And I know there are many others. I think of Franklin only because before you and I worked together, I think I asked him about you. So it must be gratifying to have that relationship with so many different authors whose writing styles are so different, and you get to participate in that process.
Well, and you hit on a big part of it. The writing styles are different, and it makes it's a completely different experience for me every time I get into a new book or a new author relationship, because the stories are different, the characters are different, the way the stories are put together are different, and it's still me bringing life to the characters, but it's a very different set of characters and a very different story.
And you focused in, and you told me this, I think, when we first started working together. You said you wanted to really be in that post-apocalyptic dystopian space, and you've kind of cornered that, either true crime or the post-apocalyptic dystopian. Is there another genre that interests you, or you have too much work as it is to keep you busy?
To be determined. Right now, I'm totally content with the two of those. And I think you've probably heard this expression before. Instead of don't put all your eggs in one basket, is go ahead and put your eggs in one basket. Just watch the basket very carefully.
Right. Exactly. So I know you can't see this, but throughout our conversation, Kevin, your image has either been spot on or it's frozen a little bit, and sometimes it gets a little warbly. I'm a little concerned that perhaps there's an EMP attack nearby, and that your equipment's being impacted by it. So I don't want to keep our.
No, there was an instance with both of us in the hurricane zone. There was an instance where I was working on a post-apocalyptic book, and we had a near strike of a hurricane that took the electric grid down and made fuel scarce because no one could pump it. And I was reading a part of the book where the electric grid had gone down and fuel was scarce. So I thought that was a pretty fitting
right on
part of the story.
It's funny, the number of stories that I've written, or other people in this same genre have written, that seem to have come to pass over the last few years. I can't tell you the number of people I've had who've asked me to start writing books about
exactly.
the lottery, so that good things happen. But as always, I appreciate spending some time. Go ahead.
And I would just say that for John Beck, one of the things I like most about the story you spend a little time with his backstory, sort of how he came to be, how he is this damaged soul. And in my mind, if you could actually go back and make a story out of that backstory, be able to do that, you know, because I think it's certainly capable with John Beck. That's the mark of a really interesting character to me, where his backstory, which is mentioned over the course of, you know, paragraphs, right? To know that you could actually go back and there's enough there to mine that it could be an interesting book all by itself. I think that's the mark of a really interesting character.
Oh, well, thank you. That's kind. You know, one of the things that people have asked me, so in book one, you know, he's searching for his daughter, gets sidetracked along the way. In book two, it's almost people who've read my books know there's almost always a Wizard of Oz reference in every book. And this second book, there's sort of a Wizard of Oz storyline as he finds notes as to where finds clues as to where his daughter might be. And then I will tell you I'm writing book 4 now, and book 4, you begin to learn details about what happened to his daughter during the number of years after the EMP attack, when she was on the road, so to speak. And I've sort of peppered that in, much as I did in book 2 which was Canyon, where it kind of went back and forth between Mark's battle in Syria and then present day in the book. I do that with his daughter because I had so many people want to know her backstory. And I think
there was another nice piece of craft. I don't think you and I talked about it, but another nice piece of craft. And I almost cursed you for missing it. It turns out you didn't miss it. You did a better job than I would have done. I think it was the Russian playwright said that, you know, anything that's in a story needs to be there for a reason. You can't just have this thing happen. It's got to be there for a reason, and you'll see later what that reason is. And there's a thing that appears in the book, and there was a perfectly good place for that thing to be used. I'm going to talk very cryptically. A perfectly good place for that thing to be used, and it wasn't. And I said, "Darn, Tom, you know, this was where this should have come up." Well, it turns out there was a much better place for it to be used, and that's where you were going to have it be. And I just took my hat off to you and bowed in great respect. So sorry to be cryptic about that for anybody who's not read it yet, but if you have, you know just what I'm talking about.
It's pink and it's very sharp. I think is what you're referring to, and it reappears throughout the series. So, and in part, I think in book 3, which I think you're working on now, I went back and added some references to it because of your note to me. Like, you know, I always planned to kind of have her have this item, but I went back and made some additional references to it.
Nice.
Before we bore everybody,
I'm having fun.
I am too. I could talk for another 20 minutes at least. I did want to remind everybody that book 1 is now available in audio with Kevin Pierce. Book 2 is available for pre-order and hits shelves on Tuesday. And then book 3 is already finished and Kevin's working on it, and it'll be available on the 11th, if not sooner, depending on how the Audible gods work their magic. And then there is a book 4 in the works. It won't be rapid release, but I have 5 books total planned right now. So
nice.
Kevin, anything else you want to add before we go? That's how I always end every interview in my day job. Is
No,
I
but
always say that. Is there anything else you want to add?
I would just urge anybody who hasn't read the books to give a swing at them, because it's a serious piece of great writing, great storytelling, and I love seeing where they're going.
I appreciate it, Kevin. You do a fabulous job as always, and it's great working with you. And wish you and everybody watching this a Merry Christmas or whatever holidays you celebrate.